Well, I think what Fakewhale and We Understand the Future are doing is exactly what needs to be done, which is not only creating beautiful exhibitions and beautiful presentations of the work, but engaging with media.
Ana Maria, welcome to Basel. And we can start speaking about your research. Can you please present your research in a short way?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I am Ana María Caballero. I'm a poet, I'm an artist, but I mostly call myself a literary artist, which means that I engage with my own verse, but also with classic literature in my artistic practice.
Okay, thank you very much. And some days ago, you sold 2 works. Can you speak about the 2 works and how they are connected with your research?
Yes, I've written 6 books, and my most recent book is called Mammal. And 2 of the poems from this book, I decided to visualize through body language. I wanted to explore how physicality connects to orality, both of which are so important for poetry and the history of poetry. And my digital works usually include my voice, which is very intimate, very personal. I feel very powerful, very potent in its ability to carry forth emotion and meaning. And for a long time, I wanted to include and incorporate my body, the corpo, into the corpus of my digital work. And I finally found a wonderful partner in Spain with whom to do this, a wonderful photographer called Luis Gaspar, who specializes in dancers. And I filmed 2 works with him, one called Waiting Room, which was the first, and another called Mammal, which is the title poem of my book, which is called Mammal. And what I did was I tried to translate the language of the poem into motion, into movement, and to express what the poem was trying to say with the motion of my body. And these 2 works were recently acquired, and I'm really excited to see them go home with wonderful collectors who really deeply connected with them as well.
Okay, thank you. And how do you think it's possible to take poetry and the huge tradition of poetry in the future, connecting with visual arts? How do you think is the most important thing to go to into the future with this kind of art?
I think that there are many ways to do it. In my own practice, I like to engage with AI. I've collaborated with wonderful artists, both visual and coding-based artists. I've also worked with my body, of course. I've worked with paper and its different manifestations and iterations, digital and otherwise. I've worked with designers. I've worked with sound engineers as well. I've really tried to explore what was possible with verse. But I think at the end of the day, what is the most important is the origin, is the moment that you sit down to write and what you are trying to say. If what you're trying to say is not honest, if there's no simplicity or honesty in your message and your intention as an artist, in your efforts to convey meaning and to connect with the day-to-day details of our life and translate them into a more universal plane, then usually everything that you add on just becomes an adornment, just becomes an embellishment, and it will not become something to which other people can connect and extract meaning from, which is what we want as artists, right? We want to be able to convey, to spill over our own cups into the cups of others.
Okay, thank you. And on which works are you working now?
Well, I'm working on a new book. Okay. And actually, it's crazy that I'm here in Basel, and I'm so excited to be presenting my work and speaking with you. But my mind is so deep inside this new book that I'm writing that I have to extricate myself from its pages to plant myself here in Basel, in Basilea. I'm working on a book that pays homage to one of Argentina's greatest writers, Julio Cortázar. His book Rayuela, which many consider to be one of the first hypertext novels in that it allowed people to decide which way to go by clicking or going back and forth. It was written in the 1960s, of course, before the internet, before we had computers. So I'm working on that, and I'm also working on a project that hopes to connect readers and audiences to Federico García Lorca, one of Spain's most beloved poets. He wrote a play called El Público 100 years ago, and it's been hailed as unrepresentable theater because it's very complex, convoluted with symbols. It actually took 50 years for someone to dare put it on stage after Lorca's death. And I'm wanting to visualize it in a communal way using artificial intelligence.
Okay, and how can art contribute to found a balance between reality and new technologies? How can find a point of contact?
You know, my art, I can speak about my art.
Yes,
it's hard
of
to
course.
speak about these things in general terms. I can speak about my art. My art is about my life. It really is very personal. Every one of my books connects and communicates the moment in which it was written. So the book that I'm writing right now that pays homage to Cortázar is about my father, who passed away a year ago, and it's my homage to my father and to what his death meant in my family. And I feel that, you know, whenever I write the most personal, intimate poems, those are the ones that end up becoming the most public, the most universal, the ones that people are able to connect to. So I write very truthfully about what I'm living as a way of digesting and understanding my own life and what it means to me, as a way of healing, as a way of moving forward or moving past moments that are difficult. And it is through that metabolism of life that art is produced. And I think that that effort that I put into my work and into really trying to, you know, biologically, almost on a cellular level, communicate what it is that I'm living and feeling is what makes it something that is able to transcend the page, go beyond the page.
Okay, and what is the relationship between this kind of research and the market?
I think, you know, I think that when you create something that's really, really truthful, it might take a while, but people connect with it. And then you start creating your own market. The market is, to me, it sounds like, you know, the planet. It's really hard to understand what that means on a personal level, on a level that fits inside a room. And I know that the market goes up, it goes down, it goes sideways, but my books, they just try to go forward. And I feel that people will connect with that forward motion and want to join me in it. And I think as artists, if we have faith, I know it's hard sometimes, but we have faith that that movement, that flood goes forward, will pull others with us. And some of those, you know, hopefully are collectors.
Okay, and the relationship with the cultural institutions or like biennials, museums and so, what kind of space do you find for your work in this environment?
You know, I think the space that I find institutionally is very similar to the space that I found with a traditional literary establishment, which is at first when I started working on digital poetry and engaging with the blockchain and engaging with new ways of presenting my work, there was just disinterest, I would say. Not bad interest, it was just disinterest, very neutral. And now I really feel like there is active interest, there is curiosity. Perhaps there is not full frontal engagement, but there is definite a curiosity that is positive, that wants to scratch the surface and come closer and understand what it is I'm trying to do. I was recently commissioned, for example, an essay by the Academy of American Poets magazine, which is one of the most important publications for the literary arts in the United States. And they asked me to write an essay on digital poetry and what it can mean for poets. And for me, the real frontier is education. When you get a fine arts degree in poetry, you're really not taught to think beyond the page. You're taught how to write cover letters and how to edit and how to read difficult texts, but you're not really taught how to maybe participate in spaces that might be more fulfilling to your verse than just the traditional sort of literary journal or book route, which I love and I still pursue, but I just think you can add on other chapters to that without diminishing the first chapter.
Okay, and how can we help new generations to go inside this kind of system, to be more critical, go more in depth in this kind of works and try also to express themselves?
Well, I think what Fakewhale and We Understand the Future are doing is exactly what needs to be done, which is not only creating beautiful exhibitions and beautiful presentations of the work, but engaging with media, engaging with publications, preserving, recording, documenting, and sharing the work in a very thoughtful and thorough way, so that it can be presented, you know, in a way that the young audiences are going to engage with it, so that someone who wants to be a poet and wants to write becomes aware that there are other possibilities, that maybe, you know, they could become a professor, they can teach creative writing classes, or maybe they can become a curator and curate poetry into exhibitions, into institutions. You know, maybe there are additional routes that are possible.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you can just speak a little bit about the works we see here on the screen.
Sure. So behind us we have Waiting Room and Mammal, which are the two choreographed works. They're my most recent works. And the one was presented at Art Dubai originally, and Mammal recently debuted at Lisbon. And here, actually, this is one of its first presentations of the work. Thin Lace, which is behind you, is also from my book, Mammal. And this was actually presented at a Female Pioneers of Digital Art exhibition at Expanded Gallery, which is run by the wonderful Ana María in Berlin. And it's part of a really special collection as well, the NFT Museum of Collection. Then Oración, which is right here, it's my first attempt at using artificial intelligence to translate Spanish into English via the visual literacy of AI, in which I work with a poem by Colombian poet María Mercedes Carranza, who I think is one of the most wonderful poets in history, has not given her the credit I think she deserves. And so what I'm doing is that I'm translating her verse visually with AI while I superimposed an original recasting of her poem that I write, that I read, and I put the verse on top. So it has that duality of being underpinned by Carranza's emotion, but with my reinterpretation on top. And then Mammal 1 was presented in Miami during Miami Art Week by Right Click Save Magazine and Vertical Crypto Art during their exhibition FemGen, and I used JavaScript to visualize this simple poem which talks about the invasion of the body when a child enters it during pregnancy. The following work is called Vasectomy and Incision in Parts. And there's actually an interesting story there because it's from my book Mammal as well. And when I worked on this book with my manuscript advisor, I asked her, where should I submit this work to get it published? And she said, oh no, Ana, forget it. No one's going to publish this. It's too long. And I actually submitted it to a Playboy NFT magazine. They have their NFT department, open call, and also run by the Sevens Foundation. And it won a grant. And it was published by Playboy. And this poem speaks of the unequal balance or weight placed on the female body, both in terms of reproduction and birth control. And it uses the scientific method as a foil. It's formatted like the scientific method that we're taught in middle school to really burst open the impossibility of condensing the body into little digestible parts. The next poem is called Fruition, and this poem juxtaposes different philosophical schools, Emerson School and Goethe School, to try to find a middle ground, which I find in the figure of Carl Linnaeus, the inventor of the binomial system of naming species. The next poem is called Chord, which became the first poem ever sold by a living artist at Sotheby's. Actually, it was inscribed onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and it was acquired by a wonderful Brazilian collector with whom I've developed a very special relationship. It is a villanelle, which is a centuries-old poetic form, originally a French form, and it is a very sort of intricate and demanding poetic form with lots of rules and regulations, and I thought it was a perfect verse to put onto the Bitcoin, on the mother of all chains, the first, this technological new advancement that changed our lives. And then the final poem is it's called Things I Am Saving to Write. It was published originally by Salamander Journal, which is published out of Suffolk University in the US, and it debuted at Bitforms Gallery in New York. And I used artificial intelligence also to visualize, to really tease out the connotations of language. It's inspired by Hemingway's short story called The Snows of Kilimanjaro, in which this Hemingway-esque, larger-than-life character all of a sudden realizes he's going to die before he planned, and he starts listing all these things that he was saving to write. And so this poem lists many things that I was saving to write. And during the 6-week exhibition at Bitforms Gallery, we actually set up a station, a stable diffusion station, and invited people to write down things they were saving to write and to visualize it with stable diffusion. And at the end of the exhibition, I wrote a new poem using all this input. We had over 100 different contributions, and I wrote a new poem called Things We Are Saving to Write, which we released together with Bitforms.
Okay, thank you. And last question, where can we will see your works in next month? Some exhibition or new project?
Yes, I will be showing a new work at Menorca in the end of June. It's called 50 Ways of Looking at a Poem, inspired by Wallace Stevens' poem called 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, in which I printed the same poem 50 times and asked 50 different artists to annotate it by hand. And these poems, these hand-annotated poems, will be exhibited as one living organism altogether, which shows 50 ways of connecting with the same text. And then my ongoing series called Being Borges will be exhibited at Periphoto in November with Office in Part.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.